Hello, welcome to the webinar. This is Steve Bizanow from Media Services, and welcome to the DPO webinar. We're excited to present this today. It's a popular product around the world, and we work with another one of the companies in the cast and crew family of companies, Sargent Disc. And today we're lucky enough to have a few people from Sargent Disc and the development company. A couple of things, just be aware, all of your microphones are off. You'll be able to key in questions throughout, and we'll get to as many questions as possible. And if we don't get to answer them online, we will get back to you offline. So, and feel free after the fact to send us questions via email. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hand this over to Lawrence Sargent, who's the co-head of international at Casting Crew, and is one of the people who helped bring this to market. And I'm going to switch over the screen so they can start presenting it. And Lawrence, it's all yours.
Great, thank you, Steve. And whilst you're doing that, I'd just like to say it's great to be able to join you for this media services webinar and to introduce digital purchase order, which I think is the industry standard for digital purchase order software. It's part of our digital production office, which in these difficult times, we've been working hard to help productions use to get back to work safely. Under the new COVID protocols, it's more important than ever for productions to be able to send, track, and approve documents digitally. We'll be talking about how digital purchase order can help with that. So I'm delighted to be joined by Jade Riley from our team, who's going to run through the demo. But before we do that, we're also joined by Bogdan Tomasini-Buchner, who is the founder and CEO of Lebog Software, responsible for the development of DPO. We've been working together for a long time, and certainly rolling it out in our industry for a number of years now, since 5 years or more. But Bogdan, maybe it would help to explain a little bit around the background as to what DPO is all about, and what you were doing and why you came up with the product. It would kind of help set the scene, I think.
Yeah, thank you, Lawrence, and thank you also for inviting me to this webinar. We actually started DPO, let me think, 8 years ago already, and I was a line producer back then and never really understood the concept why we had all smartphones available, but still had to fill in paper purchase orders, which was very time consuming, very complicated. We also had to take care of there's no PO number is missing, and it was just a very time-consuming, difficult process. And this was the initial idea, to streamline this purchasing workflow, make it very easy for those who create POs and also who approve them, and also for the accounting. And basically, this is what we have accomplished. We generated a system that people felt it's very easy to use. We have like an average approval time frame of less than 5 minutes statistically, and yeah, the response was great, and it became like a worldwide standard for purchase order software that we developed, and that's actually very great.
And it's used in other industries as well, so I assume you've learned quite a lot from working with those. Not that it's the focus of today, but it certainly helped you to learn what everybody needed from a purchase order solution.
Exactly. We also developed this generically and also like to customizable, that it's not really particular to any type of concept. It's very open, so you can really use the purchase order software the way how you would like to use them. And also not to mention, it's not just the app that you might see on your desktop. It's also the mobile apps that we have available, which is a key factor, because film production in particularly, but also other industries, they are not at their desk all the time. They are on their way, and they can still do the same thing as if they are at their desk. And that's a big step forward, because it makes the whole workflow very flexible.
You mentioned all the configurability. That sounds a little bit complex. Obviously, for this to be usable, the product has to be simple. So how do you hide that from the user? How do you make it easy to use so that you don't have to train your teams on, when they pick it up and start using it for the first time?
The key factor is that that you can pre-populate any information that you would like to implement in DPO in the back end. So we have an administration section where you can place all the information for the users. For example, your department names, your vendors that you might want to use, your account codes, everything can be already predefined in there. So if you want to create a purchase order, it's not like that you have to start from the beginning and start typing all the information that you need. You can actually use the existing information. And on top of that, DPO remembers what you type in. So if you want to type in vendor information, you don't have to retype them in next time. Next time you just use them again, and it makes it very fast to use the software. And that's the main reason why people feel it's very simple to use.
And it's not just used for POs. Today we'll be looking at that on the web application, so we won't see the mobile apps, but it's not just POs that you can use DPO for, is it? There are other things you can do with it too.
Definitely not. I mentioned that we are being used in other industries, but even within the film industry, people use this for travel authorization, check requests, and all this stuff. So you can completely customize the software and also use it for different purposes, not just for POs.
Great. We're going to move on a little bit now and just go through the slides. So thank you, Bogdan. I'm sure feel free to jump in whenever you have anything to comment.
Definitely.
We touched a little bit on COVID earlier, and obviously the whole aim of the Digital Production Office is to help people work safely, but it's not just about that. It's great to see a lot of productions going paperless to be more sustainable, but it's also about working efficiently. And as Bogdan mentioned, with approval times of less than 5 minutes on average, it's certainly the case with DPO. It's also about working intelligently, because with the ability to track POs and get them approved by the right person at the right time, you know where you're at, and the system does the thinking for you. It's about working securely, so you don't have pieces of paper everywhere, and only the person who needs to see something will see it at the right time when they need to deal with that particular PO. And in terms of the sustainability, each PO saves around 50 grams of carbon, so we can save a lot of trees, up to half a ton of carbon on a major feature production, and that's without taking into account any of the postage and delivery and the carbon emissions associated with that. So it's pretty good considering that it's faster than going by FedEx as well. And finally, it's about working from anywhere. So we touched on the mobile apps, but whether you're on set, on location, at home, working under COVID, unfortunately, you have DPO in your pocket and you can create and approve POs on the go. So before Jade walks us through the features of DPO, we can just have a quick look. Obviously, here's some nice words from a production that shot in Spain, but the DPO is used throughout the world and in the US more and more. Thought it'd be useful to just run through very quickly the sort of end-to-end process to put it into context. Obviously, before you get started, you need to invite your users to DPO. There's a very simple process to do that. They get an email, they get online, and then there's a simple process again for the creation of a PO, which we'll see a demo of today. Once the PO is created, you go through an approval chain, and that's fully customizable. But once that's done, although the configuration can be complex, the application of that is very straightforward. So the approvers only see what they need to see at the right time. Then when it's fully approved, the purchase order is sent to the production on file, and it's also sent out to the supplier. That can be done automatically. And that's not the end of the story. After that, you then need to start thinking about tracking deliveries, whether goods have been received, and also logging and with a new feature, approving invoices. The system can also do other intelligent things for you, such as remind you when rental periods are coming to an end, and such like. And the final thing, of course, when you've collected all this information, is what you do with it. Well, there is an input into Showbiz budgeting, and so you can import it into your accounting software or your actuals to keep a track of where you're at from a cost perspective. So if we move on to the next slide, yeah, just to say, here's a reminder of that. Using Showbiz, you can bring in your POs now and import the files, so you don't have to rekey everything as you go along. But as we're about to see, DPO is all about simplicity. It helps you control your costs, all the complexities hidden, and we may see some of the more complicated configuration as we go through some Q&A at the end. It's worth saying, if you do have any questions, please feel free. I think there's an online chat where you can post those, and we'll try and come to those at the end. And in the meantime, Jade's going to start by showing us how to create, amend, and approve POs using digital purchase order. So Jade, if you want to switch over, you can get started.
Great, thank you, Lawrence. 1 second. Okay, so welcome to Digital Purchase Order, which, as explained, is our web-based application for creating, viewing, approving, editing and sending purchase orders. A DPO book is a self-contained module with its own users, supplier, vendor list and approval chain. So what you can see here is the login page, which you will see once you've been invited to your show. So I'm going to log in now. When you log in, you'll see a list of the books that you have access to. Now, you usually have one book per show, so you may see one book or you may see many. You can then choose which book you would like to go into and work in. And when you go into that book, you will automatically land on the View PO tab, which is here, and it's one of the 3 main tabs within DPO. The other 2 are Create New PO and Approval List. So within the View POs screen, you can see, sort and filter all of the POs that have been created. You can filter them by the purchase orders that you have created, or you can filter by all, which is here down the left-hand side. You can also sort up here by most recent, least recent, last modified, or highest or lowest PO number. By default, it's always sorted by most recent. So you'll find your most recent purchase order at the top. On the right-hand side, you can filter by status. So by default, it's sorted by approved and pending, but you can change that and filter by any status you require. You can view the POs by budget, department, supplier, expenditure type and currency, which is listed here down the left-hand side. And when you do the drop down, you'll see a list of all of those that you have saved to choose from. If you know the PO number you're looking for, you can search for it in this search bar here. And we also have an advanced search as well, which is this button here that looks slightly like a filter. You click on that, there's other ways, plus the ways just mentioned, there's more ways to search for specific POs. You can search by approved date or PO date, and you can even search by account code as well within the advanced search. So what I'm going to do now is take you to the top left up here, Create New PO, and show you how we create a purchase order within DPO. So firstly, it will ask for department. Now, this isn't necessarily your department, it's the department that relates to the purchase order you're creating. And when you click on the drop down, you'll see a list of the saved departments. So if you choose one of those, you can then start typing your supplier, which is the second mandatory thing to put in. Once you start typing your supplier, you will see a list of all the saved suppliers for you to choose from, and you can then click next. The component section is an optional section to have set up within DPO, and if you do have it set up, it's basically a question related section. So for example, related party declaration, you can choose that you are aware or not aware, as an example. Next is items. So this is where you would add the detail and the lines of your purchase order. So I'm going to go ahead and add item to create my first line for my purchase order. As an example, I'm going to put swords as the item and battle scene as the description. You'll then need to choose a type of expenditure. and you'll see a list of all of the type of expenditures that have been saved. And by saved, I mean saved within administration by someone who has administration rights within DPO. So I'm going to choose purchase. You will then need to put in a quantity and a net price. And with the quantity and net price filled in, DPO will do the calculation for you. You can then choose a currency from the drop down here. So I'm going to choose US dollars as the currency. You then may see account code to choose, and you may see budget as well, and a sub budget. You can then click add, and you'll see that we've created our first line for our purchase order, and we can see that it's a purchase. We can see that we've got 50 stores of $50 per item, and DPO has done the calculation for us here. I'm going to go ahead and create another line just to show you a different type of expenditure and how that appears. So this time, horses as the name of the item, battle scene as a description, and I'm going to choose rental as the type of expenditure. Now you'll see that because I've chosen rental, a from and to date field appears. So within that date field, I'm going to choose a week. Now again, you'll need to put in your quantity and your net price. Those are the two mandatory fields. Multiplier and multiplier type may or may not appear. It would need to be switched on within the admin section if you do want to use multiplier type. What I would put in here is 1 week, as that reflects the dates that we've chosen above within the date fields. I'm then going to choose my account code again, budget, and my sub budget. Now you can see here we've got 3 fields. There are 3 extra text fields, and they're what we call extra fields within administration. They can be set up and they can be called whatever you would like them to be called. So for example, we've got asset, episode, and tax credit. If you do wish to use those, as mentioned, you can have them set up and they can be there to add descriptions in when you create your purchase order. So you can see now that we've got 2 lines. We've got our purchase line and our rental line, and we can see the total down here. Now, before you continue with the purchase order, there's some things down the left-hand side here that you can do. So you can add notes that will appear on the face of your purchase order once it's been created. You can add a delivery address. This is sometimes useful in case your invoice address that you have set up on DPO is different to your delivery address. You can add attachments, anything that's useful related to the purchase order that you're creating. And you can also flag your PO as special if you have that set up. There are different rules for the special flag, and it's entirely up to the production how they use it. It can be called whatever it would like to be, whatever you would like it to be called. Above the line is just an example. Sometimes affects the route of approval, etc. Now at this point, you can save your PO as a draft or as a template, which is these 2 green buttons here. And if you do that, just bear in mind that it will not generate a PO number. PO number will only be generated if you create the new PO. So if you do save your PO as a draft or as a template, at a later date, if you want to find that draft or template, you come to create new PO and come straight down here to open drafts and templates, and that's where you'll find them ready to proceed with and create your PO. What I'm going to do now is create the new PO. Now, another thing to bear in mind when you create your new PO, you may or may not see the purchase order number straight away. It may be hidden until a certain stage of approval, which is how some productions like to have their setup. So our purchase order has been created, and as we don't have our purchase order numbers hidden, we can see our purchase order number here. So we can then click continue, which will take us back to the view PO screen. And as I mentioned, the POs in this screen are by default sorted by most recent. So the purchase order we've just created appears here at the top. Now you'll see that some of the purchase orders have an orange box next to them and some have a green box. That means the orange box indicates that the PO has been created but has not yet been approved by anybody in that approval chain. The green box indicates that it's already got 1 or more approvals against that PO. So I'm going to click on the PO that I've just created and open it up in a bit more detail. Now what we can see here down the left hand side is the approval chain itself. So this is a list of all of the people that will need to approve this purchase order. And when a purchase order is created, it will automatically notify the first person in the approval chain that they have a PO to approve. Now you can also manually notify people by clicking on their name within the approval chain, and that will take you to your email, and you'll be able to manually notify them by email as well. And the subject of that email will be this purchase order number SD0077. Now within the PO detail, you can see who's ordered the PO. You can see the vendor information on the right hand side, the supplier information in other words. You can see the 2 lines of detail, and you actually can change the account code without creating an amendment of the PO. That can be changed. You can also write a comment down here and save that, which will appear on the face of the PO. At the top right here, we have a toolbar of actions that you can do. So you can open your purchase order as a PDF, which will look like this. So what you'll see on the purchase order is you'll see your purchase order number on the top right, you'll see your 2 lines of detail, and you'll see an approval grid at the bottom. So this is a grid of everyone that will need to approve. If you click on the truck icon here, you can actually add delivery notes. So you can add your order number, in other words, your PO number, date of delivery, and you can record how much of the PO has been delivered. Like so. So we can see that the horse has been fully delivered, which is what the tick indicates. You can add any comments and you can click save. Those delivery notes will then appear on the face of the PO, like so. The delivery notes can be edited if need to. Going back to the toolbar at the top, you can also manage the attachments and add any attachments as well. You can temporarily close and reopen the purchase order by clicking on this button here. You can amend the purchase order and you can void the purchase order. Now, if you void a purchase order, it means that you are essentially cancelling that purchase order. It will still appear within DPO and the purchase order number will still appear, but it will be void. I'll show you now how a void PO will appear. So if we go to this bar up here and search by void, this is how a void PO will appear. So it will appear greyed out and it will say void. We can still see the PO number and the total. And when we click on the PO, we can still see all of the detail. It will just have a void stamp going across it. And that's the same if you open it as a PDF. It will have a stamp across it saying void. So once you have voided a PO, that action is non-reversible. If you want to create a new PO based on that one, you can click on this button here, which appears next to each purchase order within View POs. And essentially what you're doing is copying that PO and creating a new PO based on that information. It will take you to the Create New PO tab again, where you can go through each section, change anything that you would like to change, add anything that you need to add, and then you can create a new PO, which will be a valid PO, and it will create a new purchase order and a new PO. Now what I'm going to do is go to this button here, which is Amend Purchase Order, and show you how we amend the purchase order that we have just created. So when you amend a purchase order, it will take you to the Create New PO tab, and you can essentially go through all of the sections again, and you can change anything that you need to change. For example, I'm going to change the quantity of swords in my first line, and I'm also going to change the net price of the horses as well. What you can see here is a red box that says amendment comment. So that's telling us that we need to add an amendment comment before we can amend our PO to explain what we've changed. Like so. You can then click close and you're then able to amend your PO. And as you can see, the PO number that you originally got stays the same. That does not change. The only thing that you'll see that is slightly changed when you amend a purchase order is that you receive a revision number next to the number. So the revision number will continue to go up depending on how many times you amend your purchase order. You will also see a revision date and a revision time as well. So there are three main ways to indicate and spot that a PO has been amended. The first way is to scroll down, and because we've added an amendment comment, that amendment comment has appeared on the purchase order face. So you can see here a blue box. The blue box indicates an amendment. We can see who made the amendment, what their job title is, the date and the time, and also the comment that was made as well. So that's the first way to indicate an amendment. The second way would be to look here. Because the price has been changed, we can see a previous total, a new total, and a difference between the two totals. Also, if we go to a PDF view, and open it, we will be able to see the purchase order. So we'll be able to see the purchase order that has been amended on the first page. Then if we scroll down, we can see any comments on the second page if you have them switched on PDF view. On the third page, we can see the amendment. So the amended PO that has an amendment stamp across it, similar to void, but it will say amended rather than void. Now, as mentioned, when a purchase order is created, it will send a notification to the first person in the approval chain that they need to approve their PO. So what I'm going to do now is log out of this user and log in as the first approver to show you how we approve purchase orders. So as an approver, it's sometimes helpful when you're at this stage where you can see your PO books to go to PO books with approvals. And as you'll see, above each PO book, there is a red circle with a white number inside. That indicates how many purchase orders are in that book that require your approval. So if we go into the book, again, we will land on the View PO tab. However, as an approver, you'll need to go to the Approval List tab, which essentially is your to-do list. In that approval list section, you'll see a list of all of the POs that require your approval. And they will be sorted by oldest PO at the top and newest PO at the very bottom. So what I'm going to do is click on the PO that we just created and check all of the detail. The account number, again, can be changed without creating an amendment. You can view the PO as a PDF on the toolbar at the top right. You can manage any of the attachments. You can also amend the purchase order. And if we scroll down, we can see the amendment comment. And we then have the option to write a comment for approval and then approve or decline the purchase order. Now, once you've approved a purchase order, it will remove itself from the approval list as that PO has now been dealt with, and it will then go to the second person in the approval chain for their approval. There is this feature here, which is a thumbs up, which is a quick approval feature. So if you have that switched on, you are able to click on that, and then you'll have the ability to quickly approve or decline each PO without having to open the detail. So that's something that can be set up within administration. I'm just going to log in as the previous user again. Now our PO number 77, we can now see that it's appearing green because it's got one approval. On the left-hand side, when we open the detail, we can see it's now been approved by J Brown. When we scroll down, we can now see a green box as well as a blue box. So the blue box, as mentioned, is an amendment comment box, and the green box indicates an approval comment. So we can see that John Brown, the prop master, approved this PO on this date and time, and he added a comment to say it was okay. Now, we've created this purchase order in dollars, and the production actually have their base currency as dollars. Now, if you was to create a PO in sterling, like this one here, you would see, the amount appear in sterling and in dollars. So the PO book default currency is dollars, and the PO created in this case here is in sterling. So on the face of the PO, you'll see the amounts in both currencies. Now, something useful for each user is if they go to the top right-hand side and they go to settings, that's where you can administrate your account. So it will take you to your profile information where you can change your password, etc. You can then go to settings, which you'll have the ability to manually change which notifications you would like to receive or not receive by email. So you'll see a list of the notifications here down the left-hand side, and you'll be able to tick and untick the relevant boxes. You can also select your language and region, and also your default currency as well. And anything you do within this screen as your user will not affect any other user. It's for your user specifically. Now I'm going to pass you over to Bogdan to answer any questions that you may have.
Right. Yeah, we actually have a bunch of questions that came in. If I can read them off and you guys can answer them. And I'll go through a few of them. The first question that came in is, can you add departments that may not be there?
Yes, of course. If you remember, there was the admin section. So in the administration section, this is completely customizable as you go. It's not set in stone. So you set this up in the beginning, but if you are missing one department that you would like to add, you can do that anytime.
Okay.
You would have to have the right privileges to do that. Jade, it might be useful just to pull the application back up again as we go through these questions, just in case we need to show anything. I think if it's easy to do.
Yeah, no problem.
All right.
Yeah, it's correct. You need to be an admin to do this. So that's something just to provide security, because not everyone should be able to change things. So only administrators have access to the admin section and can make those changes.
All right, great. All right, next question that came up, for POs, can you create job-specific defaults?
Jobs.
Cost center default. Is that the question?
I would assume each book is specific to one project, so it probably is the full thing anyway.
Okay, so yeah, apologies. So if we're talking about specific job costings for projects, then we would typically set up a PO book per project, which allows you the next level to be a departmental approval or a departmental cost and budget. But in principle, you could have one PO book and treat each department as a job costing, if you like. So there are a number of ways you could go about it.
Yeah, because commercials might actually use it that way, so that makes sense.
Yeah, if you had a lot of very small projects, then that would be a good way to address it, but it does depend on your reporting requirements as to the best way to go about setting it up.
All right, next, do we set up the account code prior to the start of the project?
Yes, that's something you can do. We have a chart of accounts feature in there. You can import them in there, and then you can also use them. But if you don't want to use them, that's fine as well. You can also type them in, or you can also use a combination of both, that you select previously populated information or type them in manually. So all the options are available.
Okay. Next person has two questions. How do you go between books if you have more than one?
Actually, if you can show this, yeah, you can just click on your email address at the upper right corner and then select PO book. If you click on this, then you can switch to the other ones.
Okay. All right,
and then search and filter those. Just to add it, you can also have only active PO books showing on there, I believe. So yeah, so you can show or remove the.
You can filter by active, or you can filter by expired, or PO books with approvals as well, if you're an approver.
So if you've got some old shows you don't want to see every time on that list, you can get rid of those by default.
Okay, and next question from same person, and how to set up account codes with only one person who can change those codes.
That's again the administrator privilege. So if you don't want anyone else changing account codes, you should make yourself admin and not anyone else, and then you are able to edit those account codes in the chart of accounts section.
All right, and next question, amendments can only be made before any approval? That's a question.
So that's a setting.
They can be made during as well.
Yeah, but there is a setting in there that you cannot do any amendment after final approval. That's possible as well, but that's a setting.
All right, that makes sense.
The configuration.
Do the vendors need to be set up prior to a PO being created?
It would be
setting
handy.
As well.
Yeah, it would be handy. You can do this, obviously, but you can also start typing in the vendors, even if you have not even one saved yet.
Okay. All right. Next, how do you allocate costs between departments?
Well, the cost center would then depend on the cost code that you use and whether you have a departmental indicator within your chart of accounts. If it's otherwise, you would need to split the PO, I guess. But no, just by using different account codes, you can't have half a PO in one department and half in another. It would be just the cost center that you allocate it to, each line item.
That makes sense. Next question, what happens if you decline? Does it go back to the creator?
The creator gets a notification that the PO has been declined, and then Jade showed this already. You can recreate this PO based on this information. So you basically practically generate a new PO based on the previous PO.
Okay. Next question, does this sync with Smart Accounting, Vista, or PSL?
So I believe there was, or there is an import into Smart Accounting for some studios, but yes, in terms of PSL, definitely, and that's currently our focus is to work on a much deeper integration with PSL, and also obviously we now have an upload into Showbiz Budgeting and Media Web hopefully to follow. So effectively. Yes, in some instances it does depend on the package, and it needs that package to integrate back to DPO as well.
Right. Okay. And last couple, for the related party flag during the PO creation, what happens if the user selects it is a related party? Does that make sense?
I think that was a PO component, Bogdan, that's been configured for a particular set of questions. So the behavior there is purely a data collection one. It's not going to change the workflow as far as I'm aware in that instance. It's simply a way of collecting that information.
Exactly. It's just there might be a policy that you want to track whether there is a related party awareness or not. So this is just to get additional information while you create a PO, but as Lawrence said, it will not change the workflow of the PO.
Okay. Let's see. In your example, if you had put 2 weeks into that field, would it have changed anything? This might be far back, so I don't know if that makes sense.
It wouldn't change anything, no. It would just be there for reference within the item multiplier field.
Okay.
Although if you increase the number of weeks, obviously it'll multiply up to give you the amount for each line item. So
all right, just trying to go through a few more here for you. Will this deck be emailed after the presentation? Just beware, the webinar is being recorded, so you'll be able to get a link. Anybody who wants to go over it again, so that I can answer.
I'm happy to share the slides as well, Steve.
Okay, all right. And last, how do you attach back up to the PO?
So by doing that, you can click into the purchase order itself, and you can go to manage attachments, which is along the toolbar at the top right, and that's where you can add attachments for backup to the purchase order.
Okay. All right, and that seems to be the end of the questions. Oh wait, one more just popped in, sorry. How would you use this for check requests and travel authorizations?
So we have implemented both of those, and with travel authorization, there is a different design. I don't know if you have a TA project accessible to you, Jade, but if you do, then
I don't, unfortunately.
Okay, so we won't be able to show you that now, but we can certainly demo that at another time. Effectively, it's very similar to the end-to-end process is very similar, but we can collect additional questions using those components that we just talked about. And in addition, the actual PO comes out in a different color to make it clear. I think it's a kind of a maroon color rather than a blue one, just to make it absolutely clear. So, but the end-to-end process is really very similar in terms of creation and approval. It's just that there is some specific language around the type of information that you're creating. So it's through configuration mostly.
All right, so that's all the questions we have.
Great.
And I don't know if you guys have anything else.
Well, I guess Jade and Bogdan, maybe you could just, if we have a few more minutes, we can just sort of just go down through the administration side and just look at the areas that are configurable.
Do you want me to go through the invoice approval feature?
Oh, of course, yeah. Thank you very much, Jade. Yeah, that was a key one. Well done. Keep us on track.
Perfect. So the new feature, as mentioned, that we have is the invoice approval feature, which is where you can attach invoices to a specific PO that it relates to, and you can then send that invoice through the approval chain, which will at the moment go through the same approval chain as the purchase order. However, I believe in phase 2, Bogdan, correct me if I'm wrong, that there will be the ability to have a separate approval chain for invoice approvals to purchase order approvals.
Exactly. We are actually about to release this update. So it's not like the same approval chain. You can also have a different approval chain for invoices, for the AP approval. This will be available definitely before the end of the year.
Perfect. So with invoice approvals, we're in the View PO screen at the moment. Now this toolbar up here is specific for invoices. So it's a helpful toolbar if you're using the invoice approval feature. So the first button we have here is to filter the POs by POs that have not been invoiced. The second button is to filter the POs by POs that have been invoiced and also not invoiced. So it will essentially show you all of the POs. This button here will filter the POs that have been invoiced. So that's the difference between these buttons here. Has been invoiced, hasn't been invoiced, and both. Now we can show all of the POs that haven't been invoiced as an example now, and I'll just choose one of these that I would like to add my invoice to. So I can look at the PO detail, check that that's the correct PO that relates to the invoice that I have. I can then go to the dollar icon up here, which is in the toolbar that we've already been through. It's just the second icon. And that will say add new invoice. So this is where you can add the invoice detail. So you can add your invoice number, you can add your invoice date, and also your order number, which usually is your PO reference. You can then record how much of the PO has been invoiced. So in this case, I'm going to do it as part invoiced. You can then add any notes and attach the invoice itself to the purchase order. Then you'll have the option to save and send for approval, which, as mentioned, will then save the invoice to the purchase order, which will appear on the face, and it will then go through the same approval chain as the purchase order. Now, although they go through the same approval chain, they don't necessarily go through at the same stage or have to be approved or declined together. They can be approved separately and they go through at different stages. Now what we can see here, we've added our invoice. We've added one invoice, however you can add many invoices. As we know, some suppliers, they like to send several invoices against one PO. So you do have the ability to add more than one invoice. On here, we can see the invoice date, we can see the status of the invoice, and also the invoice number and the total. And then down here, we have a breakdown of what's been invoiced and the amount outstanding of the PO to be invoiced. So by looking at this, we can see that there's still £25 that needs to be invoiced. When we click on the invoice detail, it will show us what we've just put in. We can click on the attachment to view the invoice. And we can see down the left-hand side the status of approval. We can see at the moment it's not yet been approved. You can delete the invoice information here at any stage, and if you do that, it will not affect the purchase order. The purchase order will still remain open and it will still remain valid, and you'll just be deleting the invoice against it. However, if you voided the PO, the invoice would also be voided as well. Now, invoice approvals is very similar to PO approvals. So as mentioned before, we go to the approval list, which is essentially your to-do list. So if we click on there, down the left-hand side, you'll see PO approvals at the top and then invoice approvals slightly below. So if we click on invoice approvals, similar to the POs again, you'll see a list of all the invoices that require your approval, oldest invoice at the top and newest invoice at the bottom. And on that invoice, you can see the PO number that it relates to. When you open the invoice for approval and you move it slightly, you can see the corresponding PO behind that you can cross-reference and check before you decide whether you want to approve or decline. Now, in this case, we can see that this invoice has already been approved by J Brown, so we're currently at the second stage. So I'm the second approver. I can also add my comment and approve the invoice or decline. So it works very similar to POs in that sense. Once the invoice has been approved, it will be removed from the approval list. When we open the PO now as a PDF, you'll see the PO on the first page, and we can see the approved stamp now appears. We can see any comments on the second page. Again, if you have the comments set up within administration on PDFs, you'll see them. We can then see the amended PO, and we should be able to see the invoice attachment too. Bear with me. There. So on the third page of the PDF, you'll be able to see the invoice that you have attached. So that will appear in the PDF format of the PO on the third page usually. So it would come after the PO and any comments if you have them on PDF, and it would come shortly after that. And then after that, you'd see the audit trail of the amended POs. Just zoom out, you can see the whole page. The invoice, however, it is showing slightly small on my screen. However, it will appear full screen when you attach an invoice. For some reason, the template I have just shows it fairly small. It will appear full size.
And Bogdan, we have modified the PDF report itself for a number of studios and clients. So it is possible to show deliveries and invoices on the PO, but you are currently working on a report, I think, to show the invoice approval and stages in the same way as the PO. Is that correct?
Exactly. So we are building up this new feature more and more, and these are the things that we also have in our timeline in the development.
Great. Steve, are you finished with the demo, Jade? If you are...
Over to you, Steve, if there's any questions related to the invoice feature.
Yeah, there's nothing that came in. The only thing that did come in, it's probably a good question, a bunch of people asking the cost of the system?
So typically, it's available in a number of ways. We'll generally put a quote together for the duration of a show, and that package, depending on how long it lasts, will discount against a monthly cost. Otherwise, there's a monthly fee. I think it's currently in £150 a month. And again, depends on volume. So if we can do a volume pricing arrangement, if you need a lot of books but they're very small, maybe there's something that we can talk about there. But typically, yeah, monthly fee, and then that comes with unlimited users and a large number of POs and storage that you need. So we can certainly tailor something to your requirements, but otherwise there are some smaller packages available as well. Bogdan, maybe you can discuss what the cutoffs for those are. I think it's 10 people, 10 users, is that right?
Yeah, we have on the digital purchase order page some very small packages available, up to 3, up to 6, and up to 10 users, which don't come with the attachment possibility. So that's a very basic version of DPO that you can also book online without reaching out to anyone in the sales team. That's also an option to do. However, we recommend, particularly for film production, if they are even small, to reach out to the custom pricing, because we try to make a package for you completely for the film, that you don't have to add certain services every time. So we try to make a package for you that is basically doable for you to accomplish your project.
So the easiest option is to contact either your sales rep at Media Services or Cast and Crew in the US, and that will come directly to us, and we can put a package together at Sergeant Disc for whatever type of production or productions that you need. But I have to add that the pricing of DPO was largely based around the paper process, but without allowing for the efficiency gains that you have without using couriers and deliveries, and obviously the time savings that come with being able to do this online from anywhere are quite significant. So it is tried and tested.
Yeah, and also to mention the cost that you save if you don't print anymore those POs. That basically also save a lot of paper and hassle with your printers around you.
All right. Well, so we all set? So if anybody has further questions after the webinar, feel free to reach out. You can reach out to me in New York at steve@mediaservices.com, and we'll send out contact info for everybody. Is there an email address at Sergeant Disc for information?
Yeah, sales@sergeant-disc.com would be the best place to go.
All right. Well, thank you guys for the presentation, and we appreciate it. And if anybody thinks of questions, feel free to reach out, and hopefully we'll be doing more demos on this.
Great.
So
thanks for having us.
Thanks everybody for coming. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for joining. Have a good day.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye.